The alarm bells rang through the entire cargo freighter at 2:47 in the morning. Captain Jake Morgan woke up in his small cabin to the terrible sound of the ship shaking and the warning lights flashing red. He jumped out of his bed and ran to the bridge without even putting on his jacket. The hyperspace drive was making a sound like nothing Jake had ever heard before. It was a grinding, tearing noise that made his teeth hurt. Engineer Nicole Torres was already at her station, her hands moving fast across the control panels. Her face was white, and her lips were pressed together in a thin line. "We are losing the drive," she said without looking at him. "The cooling system failed during the jump. We are going down." Jake grabbed the armrest of the captain's chair. "How long do we have?" "Minutes. Maybe less," Nicole said. "I am taking us out of hyperspace now, but we are going to come out hard." The ship shook again, and this time everyone on the bridge felt the violent pull of gravity as they dropped from hyperspace. Navigator Sophie Chun held onto her seat with both hands. Her eyes were wide and afraid, but her voice was steady when she called out the information. "We have an uncharted planet below us. Dense forests, some mountains, water sources detected," Sophie said quickly. "Impact in 90 seconds. Medical Officer Connor Hayes ran into the bridge, holding the railing to keep himself steady. He looked at Jake and knew from the captain's face that this was real. This was happening. "Brace positions," Jake shouted. "Medical teams to the lower decks. Secure all loose cargo. This is not a drill." The ship dropped through the atmosphere like a stone. The hull began to glow orange and then red from the friction with the air. Everyone held on to whatever they could as the freighter fell and fell. Some of the crew were praying. Others were silent, staring at the walls. Sophie's voice kept calling out the numbers. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. 30. Then came the crash. The impact threw everyone forward and then back against their seats. The front section of the ship hit the ground first, and the sound was like the whole world was breaking apart. Metal screamed and twisted. Lights went out and emergency lights came on with a dim, red glow. Dust and smoke filled the air. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody made any sound. Then Connor started checking on everyone around him, his medical training taking over. Jake helped people who had fallen from their seats. Nicole was checking the damage to her systems. Sophie just sat there, breathing hard, looking at the twisted metal in front of her. "Is everyone alive?" Jake asked. His voice sounded strange in the ringing silence. Thought it took a few minutes to get a full count, but they found that everyone had survived. 7 people on this small cargo freighter. Jake, Nicole, Sophie, Connor, and 3 other crew members named Paul, Yuki, and Marcus. They were all bruised and shaken, but they were alive. Nicole moved through the ship, checking the damage. She came back to the bridge with bad news written all over her face. "The communications array is destroyed. The backup is damaged. I can try to repair it, but it will take time. And the engine is completely gone. We are not flying out of here." Jake felt the weight of those words. They were not getting rescued anytime soon. Nobody on their route knew they had crashed. They might not be found for weeks or months. "How long can we survive here?" Jake asked Connor. "If we are smart about water and food, maybe 2 months on the supplies we have," Connor said. "After that, we need to find local food sources or find another way to signal for help." Jake looked out the broken window of the bridge. The crash had cleared away a large section of forest. Beyond the clearing, the trees were tall and strange, with colors he had never seen before. The air looked thick and green. Somewhere in that forest they would find whatever they needed to stay alive. That was when Sophie first saw them. She pointed with a shaking hand toward the tree line. "What? What are those?" 8 large figures were moving out of the forest. They were shaped like insects, but they were as tall as humans, maybe taller. Their skin looked hard like armor plates and was colored in shades of brown and green. They had multiple arms and antennae that moved and twisted as they walked. Their eyes were large and dark and seemed to see everything at once. "Aliens," Yuki whispered. "Those are actual aliens." Jake felt his heart beating very fast. He had trained for first contact his entire career, but training was not the same as seeing them walk toward you. He raised his hand slowly to tell everyone to stay calm. "Nobody makes any sudden moves," he said. "Nobody picks up anything that could be a weapon. We watch and we wait." The creatures came closer. There were 8 of them, and they moved with a strange coordination, as if they were all thinking the same thoughts. When they got about 50 meters from the ship, they stopped. For a very long time, the humans and the aliens just looked at each other. Then Sophie did something. She stood up slowly and walked to the broken window. She smiled at the aliens. It was a simple, peaceful smile. She raised her hand in a wave. Jake wanted to tell her to stop, but something in the aliens' behavior changed. Their antennae twisted toward her. One of them made a clicking sound, and the others all turned to look at it. It was almost like they were talking to each other. Sophie reached into her pocket and pulled out a bar of food from the emergency rations. She broke it in half and held both pieces up where the aliens could see them. Then she took a bite of one piece and made a show of swallowing it and looking fine. She tossed the other piece toward the aliens. "Sophie, what are you doing?" Connor said, his voice tight, but one of the aliens stepped forward. It picked up the food bar with one of its lower arms. It brought it close to its head, and a long, thin mouth opened beneath the eyes. The creature ate the food. After a moment, the alien made a series of clicking and chirping sounds. All 8 of the creatures turned and moved back toward the forest. But they did not go far. They stopped at the edge of the trees and waited. Jake walked to the window and looked at Sophie. That was either very brave or very stupid. Sophie looked back at him with a small smile. "Maybe both, Captain. But they are still out there. I think they want to know more about us." As the sun began to set, the crew of the crashed freighter understood that their rescue might not come from the sky. First, they would have to survive on this strange world. And to do that, they would need to understand these creatures that were now watching them from the forest. The real challenge was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the crash landing. The crew had made camp near the ship, using the metal hull for shelter and protection. The creature Sophie had first seen, whom Jake had decided to call the Kale, came and went from the forest every day. They watched the humans carefully, their large dark eyes following every movement. Sophie had continued her strategy of showing peaceful intent. She would sit on a flat rock near the camp and draw pictures in the dirt. First, she drew pictures of food, pointing to the food, then to the drawing, then to her mouth. The Kale watched this for days before they began to understand. One day, the largest Kale brought a bundle of strange fruits wrapped in large leaves and placed them near Sophie. The humans ate some and showed that they were good. The Kale made clicking sounds that might have been laughter. Nicole had been working on the communications array despite the damage. She was a clever engineer, and she found parts from other equipment she could use to build something new. But her real breakthrough came from the Kale themselves. One day, while Nicole was working outside the ship, one of the Kale came very close. Instead of being afraid, Nicole held out her hands to show she had no weapons. The Kale made a series of sharp clicking sounds. Then, something amazing happened. The Kale pointed at Nicole's wrench, then at its own arm, then at a broken piece of metal on the ground near the Kale's feet. The alien wanted help fixing something. Nicole understood. She helped the Kale repair what looked like a tool the alien had broken. Working together, side by side, they fixed the object in less than an hour. After that, the Kale came back every day with more things to fix or build. Nicole learned that the Kale were excellent builders and engineers. Through pictures and hand signals, they began to share knowledge about how different tools worked and what materials were strong. 1 week later, Jake took a team of humans out to gather food and find fresh water. They wandered into a part of the forest where the trees were different, with bark that shone like silver. That was when they heard the sound dot. It was beautiful and strange at the same time. It sounded like wind chimes mixed with a deep musical hum. The sound came from creatures that looked nothing like the Kale. These beings were shaped like large lizards, but they were covered in scales that reflected the light like jewels. Their skin was blue and green and purple, and they moved with a smooth, liquid grace. Their heads were large and flat, with eyes that glowed like amber. The creatures stopped moving when they saw the humans. Jake's hand went to his side where his flare gun was holstered, but he did not draw it. Kana, who had come along on the expedition, did something unexpected. He began to hum. It was a simple melody, something his mother had taught him when he was a child. The sound was soft and gentle. The lizard creatures froze. Their antennae, which Kana had not even noticed at first, all turned toward him. The melody stopped, and for a moment there was silence. Then the creatures made the beautiful sound again, but this time they were making it in response to Connor's humming. It was like a conversation made of music. Over the next 2 weeks, Connor spent hours near the forest edge, humming different melodies. The creatures, whom Jake called the Thrall, would answer with their own sounds. The crew began to understand that the Thrall were traitors. Through a mix of gesture, drawing, and musical sounds, Jake negotiated exchanges of goods. The humans had tools and technology that could make fire and preserve food. The Thrall had plants and meat that the humans could eat. The trade made both groups safer and stronger, but the real shock came when Paul discovered something while collecting water from a stream. The water was glowing. Not bright, but with a soft blue light that seemed to come from inside the water itself. Paul called everyone over, and they stood looking at this impossible sight. Then the water moved. Not like water normally moves. This moved with purpose. The glowing water rose up in the shape of a pillar, then took on a shape more like a person. It was made completely of crystal and light, and inside it, shapes moved like thoughts. This was a living being made of pure light and crystal. Everyone stepped back, but Sophie again did something brave. She took out the small mirror from her pocket, the one she used to check her hair. She held it up and caught the light from the sky, reflecting it toward the crystal creature. The creature stopped moving. Its internal light grew brighter. It made a sound like bells ringing. Sophie tried again, using the mirror to send different patterns of light. The creature responded to each pattern. It was clearly communicating. Jake realized that these beings, whom he named the Loomis, spoke in the language of light itself. Nicole took the problem seriously. She spent 2 days thinking about it. Then she built something from polished metal and pieces of the ship's old lighting system. She created a device that could make light patterns and send them in different ways. It took many tries, but slowly, Nicole and the Loomis began to exchange simple ideas. They learned that the Loomis needed light to live, and that they were peaceful creatures who had lived on this planet for thousands of years. Jake called a meeting with the entire crew. They sat under the trees, with the Kale watching from one side. The Thrall perched in the branches making soft sounds, and the Loomis glowing softly in a pool of water nearby. The Kale, the Thrall, and the Loomis, Jake said slowly. They are all here. They are all alive, and they have been living on this planet for a very long time. But I do not think they have ever really lived together in peace. Connor nodded. The Thrall move at night, mostly. The Kale are active during the day. The Loomis need water and light. They are adapted to different parts of the world, which means they have never needed to work together, Sophie said. But now we are here, and we can show them how. Jake looked at the 3 different species around them. In his years as a captain, he had never imagined a first contact that looked like this. But as he watched the Kale helping Nicole with her devices, the Thrall singing their beautiful sounds, and the Loomis lighting up the evening sky, he realized something important. These aliens did not want to fight the humans. They wanted to understand them, and the humans could be the bridge between 3 species that had never found a reason to work together before. Tomorrow, Jake said, we build something new, something all of us can share. It took 2 months to build it. Nicole began with the design. She understood how the Kale worked with their strong limbs and engineering minds. She knew what the Thrall needed from their visits to the forest, and she had spent enough time with the Loomis to understand their strange beauty and their deep need for light. The building site was a natural clearing, about 100 meters from the crashed ship. The Kale began by moving large stones and pieces of metal from the wreckage, creating the frame and walls. The Thrall brought materials from the forest, strong vines, wooden beams, and large flat pieces of bark that could be woven together for roofing. The Loomis did something nobody expected. They began to grow crystal structures in certain areas, creating walls and columns that would catch and hold light. Sophie managed everything. She moved between the groups, making sure everyone understood what was being built and why. She used drawings, hand signals, and the sound devices that Connor had made to translate between them. Her patience and her genuine interest in each species' comfort made everyone trust her. Jake realized early on that this was not just a shelter. This was something much more important. This was a statement that said 3 different species could live together. This was a place where enemies could become friends. What should we call it? Connor asked one day as they watched the structure grow. Sophie smiled. A refuge. That is what it is for all of us. The refuge took shape slowly. The front section was open to the air, with high ceilings that the Kale preferred. There were thick walls around this area that could hold heat because the Kale were cold-blooded and needed warmth. Heating elements, stolen from the ship and powered by small solar panels, kept this space comfortable for them. The middle section was built with music in mind. The Thrall had shown Connor how certain shapes and materials could make their beautiful sounds more clear and strong. Curved walls, polished stones, and carefully placed wooden beams created what became known as the singing chamber. The Thrall could make their songs here, and the sound would fill the space, without causing pain to anyone's ears. The back section was the most strange and wonderful. Nicole and the Loomis had worked together for weeks on this part. They created walls made of the crystal structures that the Loomis grew. These walls were transparent and allowed light to pass through while slowing it down and making it beautiful. There were pools of water throughout this section, and the Loomis lived partially in water. Large windows faced the sun, and curved mirrors reflected the light in every direction. When the sun was high, this section became almost too bright to look at directly. The Loomis would sit or float in the water, their crystal bodies glowing with colors that hurt to see. They were so beautiful. A central hall connected all 3 sections. This was the heart of the refuge. This is where food was prepared and shared. Connor took charge of the kitchens. He discovered that the Kale had a strong sense of taste and enjoyed food that was warm and had strong flavors. Paul helped him prepare large pots of mixed vegetables and meat, seasoned with spices that the Thrall traded with. For the Thrall, Connor found that they loved fermented things. Fruits and vegetables that had been stored and allowed to change became sweet and tasty to them. The Thrall would enjoy these foods while they made their music, and it became a ritual for them. The Loomis did not eat food the way the other creatures did. Instead, Connor helped Nicole create a special kind of light filter that could be placed over the water where the Loomis lived. When sunlight came through these filters, it became a kind of food for the crystal beings. The filters could also be adjusted to give the Loomis different kinds of light, and they seemed to prefer certain colors at different times. Blue light made them sing. Red light made them very still and calm. Green light made them move and dance. The day came when they opened the doors for the first time. It was a simple ceremony. Jake stood at the entrance and asked if everyone was ready. Mikhail made their clicking sounds in a new pattern that Nicole said meant agreement. The Thrall hummed their approval. The Loomis brightened with a light, so clear and golden that it seemed like the sun itself was blessing the moment. They called it opening day. The Kale came first, moving in through the entrance on their 4 legs, their antennae feeling the air. They went directly to the warm section, where heat was waiting for them. Paul had prepared a large meal of meat and vegetables, and the Kale began to eat with their long, powerful mouths. The clicking sounds they made seemed louder, more excited. Some of the Kale moved to the central hall to examine everything. Others stayed in their warm section, but they could look into the central hall and see the other creatures eating and being together. The Thrall arrived at sunset, as they preferred. They came in groups of 2 or 3, their scales reflecting the fading light like precious jewels. They moved to the singing chamber and began to hum their tasting song. They ate the fermented fruits and vegetables, and their joy was obvious. They did not stay separate. Some of them wandered into the central hall and looked at what the Kale were doing. There was no fear, no aggression, just curiosity. Finally, the Loomis emerged from the water. They moved like liquid crystals, changing shape as they flowed across the floor. They went to their section at the back of the refuge, where the light was strongest. They seemed to feed on the carefully filtered light, and they made sounds like bells and chimes. Some of them formed shapes in the water, patterns that looked almost like language or music made visible. Jake stood in the center of everything and looked around. In one building, 3 species that had never lived in peace before were now sharing space, sharing food, and learning about each other. The Kale made their clicking communication. The Thrall hummed their songs. The Loomis chimed their bell sounds. It was chaotic and strange and absolutely beautiful. Sophie came and stood next to Jake. Her eyes were wet with tears, but she was smiling. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." Jake nodded. "We did. But this is just the beginning. Word will spread about this place. Others will come. And then the real work begins. Keeping the peace. Making sure everyone feels welcome. Teaching them that they can trust each other." "We can do that," Sophie said. She looked around at the creatures of 3 different species, learning to live together in one space. "Look at them, Captain. They are already teaching themselves." Over the following weeks, traders from other places began to hear about the refuge. They came from mountains and forests and from across vast plains. They had never seen anything like it before. They came to eat food made by creatures from different worlds. They came to hear the songs of the Thrall. They came to watch the light dance in the crystals grown by the Loomis. And most importantly, they came to see proof that peace was possible. That creatures who were different could choose to understand each other. The refuge had become more than a cafe. It had become a symbol of hope. The attack came at dawn. Connor found the first sign. He was on his way to the water source to collect fresh water for the refuge when he saw the dead animal in the stream. It was a small creature that the Kale normally hunted for food. But this animal was not just dead. It had been poisoned. The water around it smelled wrong, and when Connor tested it with a small piece of plant material, the plant turned black and shriveled. Connor ran back to the refuge immediately. Jake assembled the crew and the leaders of each species. This was the first real crisis they had faced together. The Kale made harsh, angry clicking sounds. The Thrall hummed in a low, worried way. The Loomis dimmed their light, a sign that they were afraid. Someone has poisoned the water, Connor said, his voice steady. If we had drunk from that stream, we would all be dead. Nicole's face became very angry. Who would do this? Who would destroy everything we have built? Jake looked at the largest Kale in the room, a creature they called Storm because he was powerful and quick to anger. Storm's antennae were twitching in a way that meant he was disturbed. There are other Kale, Storm said slowly, making the sounds that Connor had taught the device to translate. Ancient Kale, ones who live in the deep caves. They believe that we are weak. They believe that to work with creatures that are not Kale is to lose our strength. The humans exchanged looks. They had always known that not all of the Kale who came to the refuge agreed with the peace. Some came only to trade. Some came only to watch. But they had not realized that enemies were planning against them. How many? Jake asked. Many, Storm said. His antennae drooped. The traditionalists have always been there, in the darkness. But I did not think they would be brave enough to attack. I was wrong. Over the next few days, more evidence of sabotage appeared. Someone had tried to damage the crystal structures that the Loomis had grown. The Loomis made distressed sounds like breaking glass. Someone had torn down part of the singing chamber where the Thrall performed their music. The Thrall stopped coming to the refuge. They retreated to their forest, afraid and angry. Jake called everyone together in the central hall. The situation was becoming critical. The peace they had built over months was falling apart in days. We have choices, Jake said. We can fight back. We can try to find the ones who are doing this and stop them by force. Or we can try something else. Sophie spoke up. She had not said much during the crisis, but everyone respected what she would say. What's something else? We invite them here, Jake said. We invite the traditionalists to see what we have created. We show them that we are not weak. We show them that we are stronger together than any of us could be alone. Connor shook his head. That is dangerous. If they see how much we care about this place, they might hurt it more. They might hurt us. Maybe, Jake said. But violence will definitely destroy this. It will definitely turn the Kale into enemies. We have to try to reach the ones who are attacking. We have to try to help them understand. Nicole made a hard sound that was almost a laugh. That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. It is, Jake agreed. But right now, we are going to be crazy. Storm, can you send a message to the traditionalists? Can you invite them to the refuge? Storm's antennae moved in a strange pattern. They will come. They will come because they want to prove that this place is foolish and wrong. But I am afraid for what will happen. So am I, Jake said. But we are going to do it anyway. 2 days later, the traditionalists came. There were 15 of them, larger than most of the Kale who lived near the refuge. Their armor was darker, and they moved in a way that was meant to show aggression. They stood in the central hall with their antennae raised, looking at everything with anger in their eyes. Jake walked forward slowly and made a gesture of peace. Storm did the same. The traditionalists did not attack, but they also did not accept a greeting. Welcome to the refuge, Jake said, speaking slowly so that the translation device could catch every word. We have food and water. We have warmth. We have music and light. Please, sit and be our guests. One of the traditionalists made an angry clicking sound. We do not accept the food of non-Kale. We do not accept the warmth that is meant to comfort weakness. We are here only to see the foolishness of our brothers and sisters. Sophie did something brave. She walked to where the fermented fruits were stored, the ones the Thrall loved. She took one and ate it in front of the traditionalists. She smiled. This is good. I am not Kale, and I eat what the Thrall eat. But I am still strong. I am still alive. I am still intelligent. She walked to the warm section and sat in one of the heated areas, even though it was hot for humans. I sit in your warmth, but I do not become weak. Heat is heat. It is good. It is not weakness to use what the world gives you. Then she walked to the singing chamber. The thrall were still afraid and had not returned, but Sophie stood there and she sang. Her voice was not beautiful like the thrall's music, but it was true and honest. The thrall sing. Singing is not only for Kale, but Kale can listen to song and still be strong. One of the younger traditionalists, a female with scars on her armor, watched Sophie carefully. When Sophie finished, the young female made a sound that was almost like song herself. Just a small sound, but it was different from the harsh anger of the others. Connor came forward then. He carried with him one of the light devices that he and Nicole had built. He had been working on something new, and he showed the traditionalists how humans, through understanding and cooperation with other species, could create things that no single species could have created alone. Look at this, Connor said. This light makes the Loomis strong. This device was built by humans, designed by Nicole, who's human, but built with ideas from the Kale and the Loomis and the Thrall. Each species brought something. Each species is necessary. Without all of us, this does not exist. The traditionalists were silent. Jake stepped forward. His voice was quiet but strong. You attack us because you fear that we are weak. But look at us. We have survived the crash. We have learned languages we never knew. We have built a place where 3 ancient enemies now share food and conversation. We are not weak. We are the strongest that any of us have ever been. He looked directly at the leader of the traditionalists. The question is not whether working together makes us weak. The question is whether you are strong enough to try something new. Whether you are brave enough to change. The leader of the traditionalists stood very still. His antennae moved slowly. Then he made a sound that was almost surprise. You actually believe this. You are not lying. You actually believe that weakness is strength. No, Jake said. I believe that survival is strength. I believe that building something together is strength. I believe that understanding creatures that are different from you and working with them is the strongest thing you can do. The young female with scars came forward. She approached Sophie and made a sound that Nicole's device translated as a question. Sophie nodded and took the female's hand gently. They stood together in the singing chamber. The other traditionalists watched. They were afraid. They were angry. But they were also thinking. They were changing their minds. Slowly but surely, by evening, the traditionalists had eaten food. They had sat in the warm sections. They had listened to the thrall's music when the brave ones returned. They had seen the light of the Loomis. They were not friends yet. But they were no longer enemies. Jake met with the leader alone. Will you stop the sabotage? He asked. The leader made a long, low sound. The young ones will. But the oldest traditionalists, the ones in the deepest caves, they will not stop. They will not believe until they see it themselves. Then they can come too, Jake said. The door is always open. The invitation is always there. We will not use force. We will use patience. We will use the truth that we live here together, and we survive together. The leader made a sound that might have been respect. You are strange creatures, you humans, but you are not weak. Perhaps there is something to learn from you. As the traditionalists left at sunset, Sophie watched them go and took Jake's hand. Is it over? She asked. Not yet, Jake said. But it is better. And that is enough for today. The distress beacon finally came to life on the morning of day 180-4. Nicole had spent weeks repairing the damaged system. She had tested it 100 times, and then 100 more. But the damaged hyperspace communications were delicate and unpredictable. Nobody knew if the signal would reach anyone. Nobody knew if anyone would come. But someone did. The rescue ship arrived on day 200 of their time on the planet. It came through the atmosphere with a roar of engines and a trail of flame. It was the biggest ship any of them had seen in months. It was beautiful and terrible, and completely from another life. Jake stood on the landing platform and watched it come down. He felt like he was watching the end of something important. The Kale made worried clicking sounds. The Thrall sang in tones that were sad and high. The Loomis dimmed their light until the crystal structures were barely glowing. Sophie gripped Jake's hand very hard. The rescue ship landed smoothly, and the side door opened. Captain Aaron Shelton came out. He was an old friend of Jake's from the academy, and he had traveled far to find this ship and bring the crew home. His face was enormous with joy as he walked toward Jake. "Jake Morgan," Aaron said, embracing his friend. "We thought you were all dead. We have searched for so long. But you are alive. Everyone is alive." "We are," Jake said. His voice sounded strange to him. "Aaron, we need to talk. All of us need to talk." Jake called everyone together. The human crew stood to one side. The three alien species stood to the other. In the middle, between the worlds, was Aaron Shelton. Trying to understand what he was seeing, Jake explained everything. He told the story of the crash and the first meeting with the Kale. He told about Sophie's bravery and how she had opened the way for peace. He told about Nicole's engineering genius and how she had learned to work with creatures she had never seen before. He told about Connor's discovery that music could be a language. He told about how they had built the refuge and how they had turned enemies into friends. Aaron listened to all of it. His face went from shock to amazed to confused. "This is incredible," Aaron said. "This is the most important discovery in human history. We need to bring these beings to the Federation. We need to tell everyone what you have done here." "We are not going," Connor said simply. Aaron turned to look at him. "I'm sorry, what?" "We are not going," Connor said again. "We are staying here." Aaron looked at Jake. "You are not serious." "Jake, you must be joking. We have rescue here. We have ships. We have home." Jake took a long breath. "I know, but Connor is right. We are staying. All of you?" Aaron asked, shocked. One by one, they spoke. Nicole said she wanted to continue the work with the Kale, to understand their engineering and build new things together. Paul said that for the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something that mattered. Yuki said that learning the language of light from the Loomis was the greatest adventure of her life. Marcus said that he had never felt this sense of community and family with any group of humans. Sophie looked at Aaron. "When I first saw the Kale, I was afraid. But then I realized something. Fear and courage are not opposites. Fear is just what tells you that something is important. And all of this is important. We cannot leave." Aaron sat down heavily on one of the benches in the refuge. He looked at the Kale and the Thrall and the Loomis. They looked back at him with their strange eyes. He realized, slowly, that he was looking at the future of human civilization. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. "I need to tell you something," Aaron said. "The Federation will want to send ships here. They will want to study this place and these creatures. They will want power and control and advantage. There will be people who come here who do not understand what you have built. There will be people who try to destroy it." Jake nodded. "I know. That is why we are staying. We are staying to protect this. To show the Federation that there is another way. To be ambassadors not just for humanity, but for peace between worlds." Aaron stood up and walked around the refuge. He looked at the warm sections for the Kale. He saw the singing chambers for the Thrall. He stood in the beautiful light of the crystal structures that the Loomis had grown. He ate food that had been prepared by all three species together. "I understand," he said when he came back. "I do not like it. I do not want to leave without you. But I understand." That night, the crew of the crashed freighter prepared supplies for Aaron to take back. Nicole gave him detailed blueprints of the refuge. Connor gave him recordings of the thrall's music. Yuki gave him images of the light patterns that the Loomis used to communicate. Paul and Marcus gave him seeds from the plants. They had been growing, but the most important thing they gave him was a message. Jake spoke to Aaron alone, on the platform of the ship as the sun was setting. The Kale were settling into their warm sections for the night. The Thrall were beginning their evening songs. The Loomis were glowing softly in the pools. "Tell the Federation that we found something important here," Jake said. "Tell them that it was not our technology that made us successful. It was not our weapons or our strength. It was our ability to listen, to understand, to see that other beings are not so different from us, even if they look strange and sound strange. Tell them that humans are capable of more than they think we are capable of. We are capable of building peace." "I will tell them," Aaron said. "But I do not know if they will listen." "Then you must tell them again," Jake said. "And again, until they do listen. Because this is the only way forward. Not conquest. Not control. Not fear. Understanding. Connection. Peace." Aaron gripped Jake's shoulder. "I will not forget this place. I will not forget what I saw here." The ship lifted off at dawn. The humans who were leaving stood in the doorway and watched their friends disappear into the sky. Connor cried, but not from sadness. The Kale made sounds of farewell. The Thrall sang one last beautiful song. The Loomis created a pattern of light that looked almost like a wave. Like they were saying goodbye. Jake, Sophie, Nicole, Connor, Paul, Yuki, and Marcus stood on the platform and watched the rescue ship disappear into the clouds. They were stranded on this world. They had given up everything they had known. Their families would wonder if they were dead. Their government would want to understand their choice. Their old lives were gone, but as they turned away from the sky and looked back at the refuge, at the three alien species that had come out to greet them, at the place they had built together, they knew they had made the right choice. Sophie took Jake's hand again, just like she had when the rescue ship arrived. "No regrets?" she asked. Jake looked at her. He looked at the others. He looked at the creatures that were now family. He looked at the building they had created, the symbol of peace that stood in this clearing on this distant world. "No regrets," he said. "This is home now. This is what we were meant to do. We were meant to come here. We were meant to crash. We were meant to show that humans can do more than just survive. We can build. We can understand. We can love creatures that are completely different from us." The Kale clicked their approval. The Thrall began to sing. The Loomis brightened their light. And in the refuge, where a human crew and three alien species lived together, the work of peace continued. The rescue had arrived after 6 months. But the humans had found something better than rescue. They had found purpose. They had found home. They had found a future that was worth staying for.